Sometimes, I mean, like the love of paper and seeing stuff printed. Yeah, I mean, now when you're doing branding projects, you're begging people to print a business card just because you want to print beautiful things.
Hi there, everybody. Here is Mario. Welcome to another episode of Design Interview 10 Questions, where we interview designers and design experts from all around the world. Today's guest is Claire Dawson. She is co-founder of Underline Studio in Toronto, Canada. So welcome, Claire. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So if you don't mind, I would immediately start with the initial question, which is, what made you become a designer?
I think much like any other designers out there, I grew up loving art, drawing all the time, painting and those kinds of things. And then when I was in high school, doing stuff like posters for theater, for school plays and things like that, when you look back at it, it probably seems more obvious that I was always meant to be a designer, but it never really entered my thinking when I was a kid. Then at high school, graduated and decided to go to university for a Bachelor of Fine Arts. So when I went to university, I studied all sorts of things. I was lucky enough that at that point, the university I went to, you still did a very general introduction to visual arts. So I was taking painting and drawing, sculpture, installation, and you didn't have to decide on design until the second year, which was like such a blessing for me. And then by the time I got to second year, I didn't really want to make a choice because I was enjoying everything so much. So I asked for special permission. Can I push it off to third year so I could keep taking art history and art criticism and all those things? And then when I was in third year, I had a teacher by the name of Didi Katona, who is the co-founder of Concrete Design, which is a very influential studio in Canada. And I thought she was the coolest. I thought the work they did was so simple and elegant and clever. And I wanted to know more about it. So I asked her if I could do an internship for the summer. And at that time, I mean, now everybody does internships, but at that time it was a bit easier. And I said, well, I'll just come in and work for free. They were kind enough to pay me for it, but I went into the studio once a week and I answered phone calls, I did filing. I didn't do any design, but I was just in the environment, and I loved it. I thought what they did was amazing, and I finally decided by third year, okay, I could do design. And yeah, eventually it kind of felt like it picked me in the end, but in retrospect, it was always there. Yeah.
And you immediately founded the studio afterwards?
No, it's myself and my business partner, Fidel. When I graduated, I began working at Concrete, and I worked there for many years and became the creative director. And Fidel, about 4 years into my career, he came to Concrete, and we worked together for about 2 years. And then he left. He moved to London and worked for Pentagram, and then returned to Canada and worked for several other studios. And we hadn't really ever talked about it or planned it, but we both just reached a point where we wanted to try something new and wanted to drive the creative ourselves. And we partnered and started Underline.
And during the time, how does your idea what design is changed?
I think that design is really, it's about translating. I think design is not really anything without an audience. So on one side you have an audience, and then on the other side you have clients, and clients need to relay a complex message or change an opinion that an audience has, and we're the people in between that can translate that can help them peel back the layers of these complex messages and make them very clear and easily understood. So I think we're lucky that we have this kind of fluency in a language, that we're this kind of connective tissue between the two sides. And it's interesting too, because we build it and then we can step away, and hopefully it can be maintained with the right people in place too.
And with the studio, I mean, I somehow see what you meant for concrete, like clever
Yes.
design, simple, elegant, also in
Yeah.
your works. But is there something that you want to communicate behind the surface of the artwork, like as a designer?
Always, yeah. I think for us, all content has always been very meaningful. We've done a large number of publications and magazine work, editorial work, and we never just take the text, flow it in, and do the design. We're always reading it, trying to get to what that nugget of meaning is, so that without it, the design is not really anything.
And when you start a new project, you pass through a process, and in this process there is a specific part of it that you are really interested into, or is the whole process?
Well, we've very intentionally kept the studio at more of a boutique size. That we're 7 people, and we've done this because we enjoy all parts of the process. The design process, maybe the business process we could do a little bit less of, but the design process, when we've been able to maintain the smaller size, we're involved in it from beginning to end. So it's this really overused word, collaboration, but generally, I really do genuinely love collaborating. You start by collaborating with the client, and then the project moves on, and you work with a team and with a group of designers, looking at something and refining it, and then taking it through to the very end, to the last deliverable. And because we're involved through the whole thing, we really think the work is better.
And how does it work when you start a new project? Like you all collaborate all together at the beginning, or like you set kind of limits and then you let others going on?
It depends. It can be both those things. Fidel and I work very closely together, and the projects come in, we will meet with clients together, and then generally one of us takes the lead, but we're always showing each other work. And before all of this, we were all in one big open space. So we were talking about things. Sometimes a designer might take a lead earlier on. Other times we might have some initial thoughts and know a direction that we want to take things. But it's very collaborative.
And is there a specific part that, for example, Fidel is better on something like, for example, colors, and you are on typography, or?
Maybe a little bit, like it might be more me color and him typography, but generally, no, we kind of, and in the beginning when we started, we were like, people said, in a business, one of you has to be focused on one thing and the other on the other, and we never really were. At first we thought, that's a bit of a problem, but no, we both have the same job description, and we both do the same things. I think that, sorry to interrupt, but I think that we're very similar in our taste with design. However, we come from very different backgrounds, and I think that's where it's been a really nice complementary partnership, because when we meet clients, we're able to understand and engage with people in different ways.
And do you think perfection exists in design?
I mean, I could talk about a lot of the design that I see out there, but might be kind of more interesting to think about is the struggle with perfectionism in design. I think it's interesting because design is this creative art form where you're constantly trying to perfect something, and that's the way we work. You try something, you refine, and this constant pursuit for perfection. But on the other side, it's you kind of have to teeter on this ledge, because the other side of that is this relentless pursuit for perfection can really hold you back, and it can be quite debilitating as a creative person too. So it's really about balancing those two things. I think that it's interesting because with design you have to really balance this struggle, because without the perfectionism, you need it because you're constantly iterating and trying to make something better. But at the other side, it can also be debilitating and hold you back and make you procrastinate to not do something for a while. So you really need it, but at the same time struggle with it. So it's a fine balance.
And what do you think about the contemporary design scene?
I think there's a lot of amazing work out there in the world of contemporary design. Specifically in Canada, we can find it a bit frustrating with clients because it's strange. It feels like clients don't really trust their eyes anymore, or designers in some ways, and I'm not sure why that's happened. You'll always find that there's a need to explain the work that you do when you're presenting or working with people that aren't familiar with design. But it seems like more and more there's this need for this business speak and jargon, and you're always hand holding throughout the process, but it seems to be needed more and more. And really, these people, if they just trust their guts and their intuition and their eyes, they know what good design is, and they've come to us because there's a problem. So they know that much, but then they don't always trust the process and trust themselves in seeing it through.
And do you struggle with it sometimes?
A little, yeah, a bit. A lot of the clients that come to us because they know they need, design's a really important part of their business. So it's not all, but there can be projects where it becomes frustrating because it's almost less about the work and more about what you have, how to convince them and how to say it, which I understand is an important part of the process, but I also wish people would just trust their eyes.
And in the last 15, 20 years, more or less, internet had a huge impact on our lives, and especially on design and how we design and so on. So what do you think about the impact the internet had on design?
Oh, what industry hasn't it had an impact on? It's changed everything. I guess it's made the conversation bigger, that we're having this conversation and that people are weighing in on projects from around the world, whereas before it used to just be, your city and your country that you're talking about the design in. Now you're talking about it at a global level. But I guess like anything, it's a great place to start for research and for inspiration, but it can also become a bit of a rabbit hole where at a certain point it stops you from actually doing the work and working on the project and doing the design.
And do you think for you as a studio are important like social media today to express your works?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
So in your studio, you usually have interns, and so you also can see every time the difference year by year from these new generations that comes out of university or they are still studying. So what's your opinion about design education today?
I think that the best schools are like focusing on the right things and in the right order. That they start with the fundamentals of design, and they don't, just go through it in one class. They spend time looking at it. So they're looking at contrast and color and balance and all of those important design fundamentals before they're rushing ahead to what the next software is, how to do things technically, and a business of design course or something like that. Because I look back in my career and I feel that a lot of what I learned in university has informed so much of the design that I do, where it's color and crafting something. So I think that there's this danger that at times with some schools that they're producing students that might know computer programs really well, but they don't know those design fundamentals, which are so important.
Of course, like what you just said is important because education in design also builds future generation of designer in the world. And what kind of role the designer will have in the future for you? Like, is it becoming more, before we started the interview, we were talking about is becoming more independent comparing with
Yes.
the past. So do you think it's going this direction?
I mean, honestly, I have no idea. I don't know what the future holds, but I think that what we bring to the table as designers will always be important. And I think back to when we started the studio, and in our first year we did 10 books, and we were immersed in editorial and book design. And what we brought to that love of craft, the knowledge of typography, our eye, all of that is carried forward into how the studio's evolved. So we're not doing 10 books a year anymore. Now it's evolved into branding, to digital design, website, all sorts of stuff. But those same skills are being translated. They kind of cross borders, so they're always important. So I think that in the future, what we're delivering is going to change, but we'll still need people at the table that have the skills that we do. Although everybody thinks they're a designer, I think what designers bring is always going to be important.
And do you miss those times when you were doing 10 books per year comparing with today?
Sometimes, I mean, like the love of paper and seeing stuff printed. Yeah, I mean, now when you're doing branding projects, you're begging people to print a business card just because you want to print beautiful things, right? So yeah, there's parts of it that we miss. Yeah, for sure.
And do you think we can do as designers something for this global pandemic? We were speaking about it before, but do you think like the design world can do something for the global pandemic?
Yeah, of course. I think that, I mean, as human beings, everyone can. And I think it goes back to the initial question about, what is design? And if we are translators of content and able to deliver to an audience, this is our chance as a world to have a reset. And to start again and to look at things in a new way and to pivot in a new direction. And to do that, there's an audience out there that needs to know why this happened, how we can make change. And it's an opportunity for very clear, direct messages. And that's where design can excel.
Well, thank you very much, Claire. It was nice to talk to
you.
Thank you for participating.
Nice to talk to you. Thank you.